Have you ever noticed that when something is forbidden, that's when you really want to do it? I don't eat a whole lot of red meat in general, but I have to tell you, on Fridays during Lent, I crave a hamburger every week. And some of you know that when you have a medical procedure and you have to fast before that, suddenly everything looks good. Or even if I have a simple blood draw and you can't have anything by mouth since midnight, I usually go to the lab, as early as I can, and I get the blood taken, and then I go out to breakfast, which is ironic because normally I don't eat breakfast. But when it seems limited, that's when you want it. We could call this temptation. You know, we've entered Lent. The backdrop of Lent is basically going into the desert, 40 days, as Jesus did in the gospel passage. But if you really listened, this gospel passage is about temptation. The temptation that Jesus had. Jesus was tempted, not just these 3 times. It's kind of there's a couple little cues there. The first one is to hear Jesus being tempted throughout the desert experience. And then these 3 are listed. But then at the end, it also says that the devil left him for a while. We have to assume that Jesus being fully human as well as fully divine, but the human part is part of human to be tempted. And it's how we respond to temptation that really makes a difference. Temptation, by definition, is tempting. It's attractive. It presents itself as good, at least for a few moments. Like, wow, how could I live without that? I like to think of temptation, it's not sin, but it's like a first cousin to sin. Temptation is the one that says, I want to introduce you to somebody I know. That person is no good for you, going to tear you down, going to destroy your life, going to really mess you up, but I want you to do it anyway. That's what temptation is. And I've learned over the years that a lot of people, when they face temptation, they feel very weak, like, I can't resist. And perhaps on our own we can't, but that's where the grace of God comes in. So we have these 3 temptations that are listed in the gospel, and each of them, I dare say, is symbolic of lots of temptations that we face. So let's look at them. The very first temptation, Jesus was hungry. The devil makes it sound so good, just, hey, there's a stone, turn it into bread. I think this is the temptation, not just about eating, but all of our appetites, all of our cravings, and many of them are destructive. That somehow we just sort of want to say, well, if I want it badly enough, I should satisfy my appetite. Not so. The second temptation, when the devil says, look at all the kingdoms of the world and all the power and glory, you can have it all. And I don't know about you, but as I read that throughout this week, I found myself thinking about all the images I've been seeing on TV and online of the big tanks and the bombing coming into Ukraine from Russia, taking over other countries, a sign of power, control, running somebody else's land because, who knows why, because. And it's not just countries that get involved in overpowering others. We people, we are so tempted to use power and control on other people. It's just like we want people to do what we want them to do when we want them to do it. We want them to do it our way. And I've heard the line, and I bet some of you have said it, usually as a parent to a kid, it's my way or the highway. It's a little sad, actually, because the person is resorting to power to try to convince the other person to change their way. It's a little misguided. But that's the temptation for power, control over other people, not just situations. The third one, however, is perhaps the one that's most significant for us. So the devil takes Jesus to this wonderful temple The temple is grand, and it's the center of their faith, and it's in the middle of Jerusalem. And this is where pilgrims come, and they know that the building represents their deep inner faith. And the devil makes it sound so logical. Just throw yourself off. And if you're God, the angels will come to rescue you. You know, I don't know about you, but since CGI has entered our movies, CGI, computer-generated imaging, we have a lot of incredible images. And with the super characters, you know, they're always throwing themselves off and nobody ever gets hurt. You know, if you don't have the CGI and somebody throws themselves off the temple and doesn't get hurt, you have to say, wow, this is divine. This is incredible. And I will confess that as a kid, as a real young kid, I thought this was pretty cool. What was wrong with this temptation? Jesus could come down from the temple. Everybody would see that he's not hurt. They might even see the angels holding him up. They would all follow him. What could be so bad about that? And as I got older, I discovered there's a lot of bad about that. Because the temptation is to take a shortcut. It's all about show. It's all about end result and not how you get there. You know, when we have the baptismal promises at baptism, or when we renew the baptismal promises, we have the 3 renunciations. The priest or deacon says, do you renounce Satan? And everybody says, I do. And all his works, I do. And all his empty show. This is the empty show. Do we renounce it? I do. It's empty. It doesn't do anything. But basically, the temptation is to cut the mission short. Jesus had a mission on earth to teach the kingdom, to bring about the new reality, the new world, a better way of living, a way of going on. And the temptation was, you don't have to live it out fully. You don't have to suffer for what is right. You don't have to show the extent of your love that even to death on the cross. I'll give you a shortcut. It would have looked good, but it would have failed because it's deficient on the fullness of love. That's the temptation for us, not to follow through on our mission. You see, because we all have a mission on earth as well. And we could fail in the very same way of not to live it out, not to learn how to love fully, not to be willing to give of ourselves for other people. There are so many challenges. There are temptations. But there are just temptations. We don't have to give in to them.